I mean, this is one of those political conflicts existing today that
Yeah.
you can't possibly make any sense of unless you know the history. The
Right.
history in this case is everything.
Hey there, Boomer. Good afternoon.
Hey,
Good morning.
hello again.
Hello again. How are you today?
I'm upright, whistling past the graveyard.
You're not dead yet,
I'm not dead yet.
as I know you're famous for saying and for wearing the T-shirt.
Yeah,
Uh,
I didn't say it. That goes to
for
Monty
Monty
Python.
Python.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so today, I want to talk about a kind of a different topic than we've had the theme of in the last few. Of course, it's going to be related to politics and global affairs, and it is a difficult topic. And I think as we go through it, just to be clear, we're not picking sides, I think, on anything. We're really just going to be discussing this topic. And that is Israel and Palestine and some of the connections, obviously, to the United States and to the Middle East and geopolitics and just what's going on. And then looking also back at the history of it to how we got to where we are now. And on a funny note, when I was messaging you earlier about, the topic, the proposed topic for today, I said, so, Israel Palestine is a topic, so study up. You said too late. Not that you're a renowned expert or anything, but I know that this is something
Don't forget, I'm just another boomer with an opinion. I have
claim.
no
Exactly.
claim to any expertise.
Yeah, and I'm just a millennial listening.
Okay.
So here to learn about it. But just for a little context setting, where we are right now, we're middle end of September. A couple things that have happened recently, where we're at in the war. The ceasefire deal is still being negotiated between Hamas and Israel, effectively to give back the rest of the hostages and demilitarize, I think, the Gaza Strip and have Israel, leave Gaza. And I know that there is a particular territory of land. I think it's the Philadelphia corridor, which
The
is the
corridor, yeah.
corridor,
That's the
and
bottom of the Gaza Strip.
which is the bottom of the Gaza Strip connecting to from Egypt into Gaza. I know that's a
Mhm.
big part of the negotiations. And this has just been at a standstill for a while, even as all parties are, I know behind the scenes, the Biden administration is, working just continuously on trying to get this ceasefire deal. And we're October, November, we're two-ish months out from the U.S. election. And I'm going to turn it over to you in just a second. But I know that it seems to me, and I want to hear your opinion about this statement, that the world in so many regards is waiting for the election to maybe take action on things that they could possibly do now. So I'll let you speak to that in just a second. But also for additional context, other things, Iranian proxies in the area, Lebanon, are, working via Hezbollah in Lebanon. We just had recently this pager attack by Israel, which I don't know
And
how
don't
many
forget the walkie-talkies.
walkie-talkies and pagers were by Israel were made into explosive devices, and using a shell company in Hungary, Hezbollah in Lebanon purchased these through this what they thought was a Hungarian company, which was actually an Israeli front, where they made these explosive devices that have been that with one message to all of these walkie-talkies and explosive devices in the last week or so exploded all across Lebanon in kind of a targeted attack by Israel against, I guess, Hezbollah militants. But this is just where we're at in this very moment. But with your, whatever rudimentary or pretty well studied actually understanding of the conflict, let's start. Let me ask you a couple questions and then bring us from the history through till now, approximately. And those
Sure.
questions are, I think it was 1947 that Israel was founded as a nation.
48, close enough.
Sorry, as an independent state, because this was kind of a result of World War II, um, you know, where a lot of colonialization was ended. It was over. The United States said, give everything back. The state of Israel was formed. But the fact that it was formed in this particular location goes back to biblical times and a certain claim around it. So I don't have a deep understanding, but now let me turn over to you and take me through kind of the biblical claims to the foundation of Israel, to the conflict between these various parties till now. So what says you?
Okay, well, I mean, this is one of those political conflicts existing today that
Yeah.
you can't possibly make any sense of unless you know the history. The
Right.
history in this case is everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, you can go back to the Old Testament where God gave Cana to the Israelites, and there are scriptures in the Old Testament which are part of the Jewish scripture, right?
Mm-hmm.
That where God makes promises, right? All this land is yours. I'm going to give all this stuff to you.
Yeah.
Now, that those scriptures a lot of times are kind of taken out of context because the there were conditions associated with this. But in
Yeah.
any event, uh, there's always been a very small but somewhat very serious group of Israelis that believe that scripture.
Okay.
Okay?
So that's where it all starts. Let me just pause there for a second.
It doesn't actually start there, but this is the background to their argument.
Correct. Correct. But that's this whole dispute about this land where Israel exists and goes back to a biblical claim from the Old Testament that this
Mm-hmm.
is the rightful land of the
Mm-hmm.
Israeli or of the Jews,
Yeah,
uh,
the so-called Zionists,
the
right?
so-called Zionists. And that is,
Zion,
how
right?
far back are we going in history to, yeah,
Oh, I'm not exactly sure, but we're we're way back, right? This it's a question of when was this written, and I forget whether it's in the Pentateuch or it's not, to give it a timeline. But it's as old as the hills, right? But in any event,
give me a
uh,
ballpark number for us simpletons.
um,
What are we talking?
you're talking 600 BC.
Okay, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
you can't hold me to that. I
Over
haven't
two and
thought
a half,
about it in a long time.
2,500 years ago. Okay.
In any event, they did, and then it became a political state, and then it got conquered by the Babylonians, and then they were dragged off to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar. This is where the Talmud was written, and so forth. Comes back, and um, gets its society and state back, Israel, so to speak, but it gets fractured, and then the Romans show up, and that's the end of that. So it becomes a province of Rome. It's very contentious. They tried to get out from underneath Roman rule for quite some time, the
Mm,
Maccabees. And the Romans considered them a royal pain in the ass.
yeah.
And it boiled over the Masada, the famous Israel, at this point just Jewish, right? Or not at this point. That comes later. Anyways, rebellions against Rome, and finally Rome, as what usually happens when you are refusing to submit to Roman rule, say, okay, that's it, we've had enough. They destroy Jerusalem, they destroy the temple, and they exile 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? They disappear into history, gone. There's no trace of them. So the concept of the Hebrew people made up of 12 tribes actually 13 because there's two half tribes. That gets erased by the Romans. All that's left are people from the tribe of Judah, a few from the tribe of Benjamin, and a
Hmm.
few Levites.
And
So
tell us,
that's why they're called Jews from the tribe of Judah.
okay, and so the 13 tribes take us back even for the origin of the
The sons of Joseph. These are all the sons of Joseph, who are Hebrews, right? They're a particular ethnicity, you know, that existed in the Middle East and in the area of not exactly Canaan, but around there, and that sort of was like a tribe. There were many, many, many tribes. This is one of them. They end up in Egyptian captivity. Joseph has the sons.
yeah,
Moses leads them out. They end up going to Canaan. They take over the place. And they immediately, as you read the narrative, they spend all their time disobeying God. And it's a big fight between God and them, according to the scripture.
yeah,
And uh, in the end, they want to be like other people. They want a king. They don't want to be ruled by judges and prophets. And they become a political state, which ends up being destroyed by the Babylonians and others at different points. They manage to get, they're allowed to go back. They set up a little political state. It immediately begins to fall into infighting among themselves and everybody else. And then finally, the Romans show up.
yeah,
Okay? When Rome shows up, that's endgame. So
yeah.
the Romans literally throw out most of the people who disappear in history, not to ever to be found, except for some crackpot Christian theories. But anyways, so
Yeah.
that's it. That's why we called them Jews. Now the Jews,
And were the Zionists there at that time?
no. Well, I mean, Zionism is a concept that
Yeah.
God gave us all this land, and this is the holy spiritual on earth
Right. This belief,
thing called we called Zion. It's
right. So
named
this,
after,
right.
huh?
That is, so this belief that they're the rightful owners of this land is
As
a
a gift from
strong,
God, sticks with them.
right.
It's there's a faction that still believes this stuff. It's been going on, right?
Yep.
Anyways, the Jews themselves, uh, you know, at some point, the Arabs and Muhammad come into being 632 AD. The Arabs create the first Arab empire. They conquer all of Palestine and so forth. Now, Palestine is an ancient Phoenician world. The Palestinians are descendants of the Phoenicians. And so this, all of history keeps going along, but this whole area is ruled first by the Arab dynasty, then so forth and so on, and it finally ends up as the Ottoman Empire. And
Yeah.
during this time, the Jews have primarily, what's left, have left.
Right. And
Okay?
they've been just cast out from their
No. There's two things. The Romans cast out most
yeah
of them. And
yeah
then time and attrition later, a lot of Jews leave. Right? They don't want to be under the Ottoman Empire. It's a Muslim empire. They go to Russia, they go to Spain, they go and they disperse.
right.
So by
And so
the time,
that's the kind of experience of Jews from that time on as being dispersed throughout the world. They've
right,
been
strangers living all throughout places. And
yeah
they were being used by the powers that be because there was Christian rules against usury. Couldn't lend money at interest, but you could do that with the Jews. They were used as a loophole to keep economics working, and everybody. But I mean, the Jews were pariahs. They were separated. You've been to many, many Jewish quarters in many, many cities in Europe. Old Jewish quarters, right? All everywhere.
yeah.
So they were, there was a lot of anti Semitism throughout their entire history, always blamed for stuff,
Yeah. And
right?
why have they always been blamed? Why is
Well,
it
for
just
one thing, is that
group?
they've
Just
always been identified, segregated behind walls. not allowed to own land, couldn't intermarry. You know, when you focus the world and capture them in a pile and you blame them for everything that ever happened,
Yeah.
every ruler has,
Yeah.
you have to develop internally this idea that they're special. And of course their religion says, hey, you're special, right? Now, personally, I we're all special. I don't see anything different about the Jews, but this has become a little bit like the myth of American individualism, rugged individualism. It's,
Exceptionalism.
it's really, they're just like everybody else, right? But
Hmm.
they've had a particular uh, 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 concept of living because what they had to do to not die, right? And how they were being used by societies that they were living among. Okay?
Yeah.
But by the time of World War One, now this is where the stuff starts to get fun. There's almost no Jews, several thousand, that's it. Palestine, Lebanon, the whole Levant, what's called the Levant. It's all of it is part of the Ottoman Empire, and it's primarily populated by Arabs. There
Mm.
are almost no Jews to speak of.
Yeah.
And they coexist in Palestine. Uh, okay, right? There's not a really big issue, right? Their numbers are small, but in any event, the Ottoman Empire is ruling over this for 500 years. I mean, this is not like
Yeah.
transitory.
Right.
So the balance, the vast 98% of the world's Jews are not in Palestine, which is different than what people today say. It's not factual. But at any rate, here they are. So then World War One breaks out, and the Ottoman Empire is part of the bad guys, right? So the British are primarily responsible, and the French to some extent, dealing with the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East during World War One. Now, this is the famous story of Sir Lawrence of Arabia. In order to deal with the Ottoman Empire, he goes and enlists the Arab countries to fight on Britain's behalf in exchange for the promise which he made, right, that when the war would be over and the Ottoman Empire would be dismantled,
Hmm.
they, meaning the Arabs, would get their own country, their own state. This was the deal. And so the Arab nations said, okay, for that, we'll fight on your side. And they did. And they helped in a very powerful way, help the British to destroy the Ottoman Empire in the Levant. Okay? When the war's over, when they go to the Treaty of Versailles, the Arabs are there going, oh boy, we're going to get our state. And the British said, nah. And they totally reneged on the deal.
Mm.
Okay? Why? Well, for one thing, oil was becoming very important,
Yeah.
especially to the British. The British were in the process of converting their entire navy, and this is not insignificant. The British
Mm.
Navy at this point is the only real navy to talk about that exists in the world, and
Yeah.
they're converting from coal to oil. And oil has been found in Iraq, okay, in the
Mm.
Levant, and they're like, we got to have this oil. So sorry, got to renege,
New plan.
and this starts some real trouble. The Arabs are very upset. They feel like they've been used and abused, and the British are like, sorry, it's the empire. What are you going to do?
Sorry,
And
Empire. Oops.
oops.
Yeah.
So the British basically maintain control over most of the Levant, Iraq, not Iran, at the Middle East, Egypt, the Levant, Saudi Arabia, everything. The British are in charge. And this remains that way until World War II. Now, there's a huge theater of the war in World War II because the Germans know that they got to get there. The whole point of
For
the
the oil.
African king wasn't because the Germans felt like owning some desert. The
Yeah.
whole idea was to get to Egypt, to cut the Suez Canal and get to the oil as well. They needed it as bad as anybody.
Mhm.
Didn't work out for them, but in the end, after the war, you got several problems. The United States is telling all of the winners, hey, you want our help from this point out, you got to get rid of your colonies, set
After
everybody
World War
free.
II.
Right?
After World War II, right?
After World War II. This,
Yeah.
you know, Winston Churchill famously remarked that, I didn't become prime minister to reside over the dissolution of the British Empire, but that's what happened. And so the Americans are saying, hey, but the British are left in what was called the British Mandate, and the French Mandate was up in Syria and Lebanon, right? To keep control of these till we figure out what to do about it.
So
These are places that haven't had nation states for 1,000 years, almost 2,000 years.
right. You're saying that the United States after World War II, as the kind of the whole world was destroyed in ruins, said give back the land to the native people. And you're saying that the British had their mandate and the French had their mandate, and they're like, hey, we're giving it back, but we're just gonna oversee it still a little
That's
bit.
right. It was
Okay.
called, they were there to administer it because it's an open problem, right? These
Yeah.
places, it's been forever since they've had nations. Who's going
Yeah.
to draw the lines? What's a nation in the Middle East? So, you know, the U.S. had to figure out, okay, what do we do about this? Well, we'll temporarily put the British in charge of an administrative state. That's it, right? So the British are broke. They're so broke, they're selling their China. Okay, their tea sets. They have to. The United States says we're not going to give you any money. Especially since you're going to maintain your colonial empire. You want help from us? Let them all go.
Yeah.
So this is the atmosphere in 1945 to 1958.
Yeah.
48, sorry. So the other problem that you kind of got out of World War II is what about the Jews,
Right.
right? Now, the Jews were not terribly welcome in the United States. We were a relatively strong uh, anti-Semite nation, right? We and now you have all these
Yeah.
Jewish refugees all over the place, and they don't want to live in Russia anymore. They don't want to live,
Yeah.
in Germany. I mean, it's a big problem. And early on in the 20th century, right, Zionism became a movement where Jews that were uh, all over the world were joining Zionist groups and pressuring the political powers that be, hey, we need some place to live.
Yeah. Right.
Well, after what happened to the Jewish people in the Holocaust, and these people are destitute, they're also refugees.
Yeah.
It's a big problem, and the United States, sort of, and the British kind of go, oh, we got to do something about this.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Can I say one thing? Because
Yeah,
you just touched on the fact that the United States at that time was not particularly Jewish friendly, right? That it wasn't as it is today in terms of how the sentiment is supporting Jews more and supporting Israel, right? Because if we
yeah.
think
None of this had happened yet.
right, and I just want to call out one little parallel between that period of time and now, which is if you recognize how the United States had a orientation that wasn't supporting Jews, you also during that time there was a part of America that was called something called America First,
Yeah,
right? And I just want
yeah,
to mention that because you say, hey, America wasn't really Jewish friendly at the time. And there's also a part of America that was quote unquote America First. And what that group was actually American Nazis saluting Hitler in Madison Square Garden, supporting a
Yeah,
home.
that was the formal Nazi party. We had a formal.
Exactly. So I
Not.
just want to mention that really quick, insert that in,
Yep.
because where do we hear America First right now as a platform?
Yeah.
Donald Trump and the Republican Party. So I just want to insert that right now just to say
Right.
it's interesting,
Yeah.
right? So now to tell
Isolationism has been in our country's DNA from the first day.
definitely,
The
definitely.
very first day. We
So I just
were
want
happy
to, yeah,
to sell stuff to Europe and to buy stuff from Europe, but we didn't want to have nothing to do with that place and all of its
sure.
wars and craziness since the first day.
Sure. And I just want to say that because America First isn't what it seems to be. And it's
Of
the
course
kind of
not.
the darker side of what
So,
of
yeah, you have to ask the question of what does that mean in the context that we're entirely a nation of immigrants? I mean, I don't even know how to make sense of
who were
that.
we talking about then? The whole world?
Yeah,
Yeah. And so
right. But
there was a story you told me once that, and I think it was around this time, right around the end of World War II, where I think you said, as a result of the Holocaust and World War II, and obviously Jews being displaced all around the world, needing a homeland, needing somewhere to go, and the fact the United States wasn't opening its arms, say, come, come. You mentioned there was I think you told me once there was a ship out at sea. Tell me that.
it was a little bit earlier, but there was a ship. It was not post World War II, but there was a ship stuffed with like 600 or 700 Jewish refugees, and the ship came to the United States, and every port refused them entry. They just kept wandering around trying to find some way to get in.
Right.
Right?
Right.
People did not like, oh, let's bring the Jews here. In fact, that
Yeah.
was part of the political calculus on the part of the American administration, which is essentially Truman at this point, that it's a bad political thing to welcome the Jews here.
Right.
Nope, we had not a great love for the Jews.
Yeah.
As we were just as anti-Semite, we're just as racist as anybody else is, right? It's a
Right.
human condition.
Yeah.
But at
But
any rate, at this point,
yeah.
the Zionist movement is getting very loud and very vocal and pushing, and then the
Yeah.
UN gets created and they're pushing there, and everybody's like, how do you solve the problem like Maria, right? So here's the British
Right.
administering Palestine. There's really basically very few Jews there. It's all 99% Arabs.
Yeah.
And they go, hey, we got an idea. Let's set up the nation of Israel. It was kind of a limited thing. And they can all go there. That they
Yeah.
used to live there 2,000 years ago. Why not?
Right.
Well, so the UN, which at this point is totally dominated by the United States, and with the British, they go to the UN and say, hey, let's give Israel a state in the middle of Palestine. And all the Arabs are going, what? You screwed us after World War I, and now you're just going to give the heart of our homeland to the Jews. So they're really not happy.
Yeah.
Okay? So at this point, there's a couple of things happening. One is that the whole area of Levant is now being carved up into distinct nations, little nations.
Right.
Transjordan, Lebanon, Syria, uh, Israel, and then there's going to be a Palestinian state. The resolution to carve off a chunk and give it to Israel also had the two-state solution in it. It said, okay, we're going to make two states where there is currently none. One
Right.
for Israel, one for the Palestinians.
Right.
Okay? The Arabs are just like beside themselves at this,
Yeah.
right? The United States and Britain say, okay, that's what happens. There's a resolution passed. And the Zionists, who have been, very actively working with us, are getting prepared. They understand what's coming. So they start trying to figure out when we parachute into the middle of this Arab world,
Yeah.
they're not going to like it, and this could end. We could be snuffed out before we even get started. So this is a very militant, serious, deadly group of people. They ask the United States for weapons and whatnot to defend themselves when they get there, and the U.S. refuses. No, no, hey, we're giving you land, you know,
You do the rest.
good
You
luck,
you look
right?
after.
So they
Yeah.
go and buy Soviet weapons from Czechoslovakia. They do a lot. They get ready. They know the first day, it's going to be hell on earth. And the Arabs around them. Now the Arabs have never been a nation in foreverville, not since their last empire back in the first century. They are buying Soviet weapons like there's no tomorrow too, and they're getting ready for war. Now they don't know how to conduct modern warfare, but they all group together and say, "Together, boys, we're gonna rush them all at the same time." Right?
All of the territories around. So
Yep.
Lebanon from the north, Egypt from the
Saudi
south,
Arabia,
under.
Egypt,
Yeah.
Iraq, Jordan,
Yeah.
Lebanon, Syria. They all get together and go, "We're gonna snuff this thing out right away."
Right.
And so it begins. Now, this is very radical. And somewhere in the shuffle, the whole idea of a Palestinian state gets kind of put on the back burner. And they're going to duke it out amongst themselves to settle what's going to happen. And so the Arabs attack immediately, and they end up losing.
And this is what
Not badly, but the Israel wins by the skin of its chinny chin chin.
and where? What time? What year are we in around?
1948,
Okay, right
the
after
first day.
they said, "Hey, here's Israel," and then they attacked them.
Yep,
Yeah. Yeah.
yep, yep.
Which I guess you can kind of understand, right?
Sure,
From a,
sure.
from a human
I
perspective.
mean,
It's been a
okay,
while since,
right. Now you'll often hear the phrase protecting Israel's right to exist,
yeah,
as if somehow they've had this right to exist for thousands and thousands of years, and other people keep trying to take it away from them,
yeah,
right? They pose this as a right,
yeah, yeah,
okay?
yeah.
If you look at history of dispossession, the American Indians could say, "Hey, we have a right to this place," but you don't hear anybody saying that,
Right.
right?
Can I
This has
ask you?
been the nature of mankind of warfare forever.
Definitely, and I don't know what someone would argue on behalf of that position, but they might say something like, "Well, we do have a right, going back to that, as you mentioned, that biblical time, and
Zionism,
it can be debated both ways, I think, because on the one hand, you can say, well, when was the first person to own this land? And then, what about them? Was that truly them or not?
right?
Or is there a
Right. It's
specific time
it's
where
it's a the whole concept is foolish, right? Because it doesn't matter whether it's a right. Nobody has a right. Might makes right,
might makes
right? The
right?
United States used its might to say Israel gets to exist.
Right, but the foundation of so much of the turmoil and so much of the chaos and the fighting, right, is based from Israel's side is based on this claim that it is
Sure.
their right, their divine right by God, that this is their land, right?
Yes, it
That's
extends.
that
They're
premise,
not saying, "Look, the world got together and said you got to have a safe
right?
place to live," and so
Through God.
that's why we're here. We have a right to be here.
Right. It is a divine right through God that
Divine right.
this is their rightful land, and therefore,
Yes.
and that's why I just
Yes.
want to like really focus on that one piece, because everything that is the premise, right, on which everything is justified, I think, right, in terms of reclaiming, taking, settling the land,
That's
etc.
right. That's right. But this is the fundamental. So it starts right. The Arabs try to get rid of them. They lose. They back up. They rethink. They get some more toys, guns, try it again.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
67. Then 73, Yom Kippur. Right
Right.
now, what's happening is that after the first war in Israel in 48, Israel kind of gets on its feet and starts being established.
Yeah.
People Jews from all over the world start going there. Now, the vast majority of them, they just want to live there. They want to be safe. They're not so Zionists,
Yeah. They're more
right?
democratic. They just want a safe homeland, and they can
Yep,
share
that's
it
it.
in
And
a democratic
and
society.
the idea that the Palestinians should have their state starts to get picked up again as the efforts of the surrounding Arabs militarily to kick them out fails. Because by this time, the United States is now arming Israel, and it's endgame. The Arab states have finally realized with the United States doing that, there is no chance of just kicking them off the land. So
Mhm.
people start going, okay, well, what about the Palestinian state? Now you get to Yasser Arafat and Camp David and the creation of
Mhm.
the Palestinian stance. And this idea of a second state was there at the inception. However, a lot of wars in between, but the Zionists, the hard right Zionists who
Yeah.
have glommed on to this divine gift from God,
Yep.
right, are saying, hell no, no, we are not going to have a nation of Arabs on our borders. That land is our land.
Yeah. Right.
We have
Now.
a divine right to that land.
Yeah.
And so Yasser Arafat and Menachem Begin get together and say, okay, we're going to have a two-state solution. We're going to let Palestine become a nation. And that was the agreement. And this causes the far right in Israel
Yeah.
to just
Can't have that.
have a cow. Assassinations begin,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they're doing everything. Now we're talking 1960. No, not 19.
Mhm.
I mean Carter, right? But I
Yeah.
mean, from
77.
the very beginning, there has been terrorism in the world because the world said, hey, you know, we're not going to give you what we promised you. Okay.
Yeah.
And the attacks in Munich and at the Olympics and so forth and so on, go on and on and on. So, this right wing part, this element
Mhm.
of Israeli life, has been doing everything it's not in power, it's a small faction,
Yeah.
but it's doing everything it can to stave this off. And
Yeah.
then the Arabs are radicalized, right? Okay, so in the beginning, the PLO was created out of that.
Palestinian.
Palestinian Liberation Organization. It was run by a political party called Fatah. And there was the Gaza Strip and there was the West Bank.
Yeah.
Fatah, which was run by Yasser Arafat, he dies. A big fight over who gets to be his successor. Uh, they pick somebody, but the PLO, a couple of bad things happen. One is the PLO becomes insanely corrupt. Money is pouring in, and the leadership of the PLO is letting everybody, regular Palestinians, starve while they engorge and enrich themselves. So it's insanely corrupt.
Yeah.
People living in the Gaza Strip it's a mess. And so there's a group gets started called Hamas. And Hamas starts off by building hospitals and feeding people and doing things for the people, and they win the hearts and minds of the people. Then there's an election. Fatah gets thrown out. Hamas comes in.
Yeah.
Hamas is super radical, saying Israel has no right to exist. We need to kill them all, right?
Yeah.
But they win political leadership and position in Gaza by taking care of the people, and their real agenda is to destroy Israel. Now, regardless of what you believe, one way or the other, when you lose the war, you should work in political means to get something. Hamas's statement, which they still say to this day, that Israel has no right to exist and we are here to destroy it, has been used by the right wing in Israel to turn Israel into a siege mentality country. That these people will not rest until they kill all of us.
Right. Right.
Okay? But the real undergirding desire of the right wing is not to live in peace with them, but it's land. Land,
Yeah.
land, land. So if you fast forward to today,
Yeah.
right, the conditions you have today, you have to recognize, number one, there's an element of the Israeli society which has this belief, has been fighting through any means possible, including assassination,
Yeah.
to prevent a Palestinian state.
Yes.
You have a radicalized, hard, crazed Gaza people saying, nope, no compromise, Israel can't exist, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is the reason that Israel has been able to say, we have to be this way because of those guys. And those guys are saying, we have to be this way because you guys, right?
Because self-supporting, right,
Right.
is a snake
Okay.
eating its
So,
tail, right? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. Right.
okay.
So, a couple of things happen.
Yeah.
All right. One is Trump gets elected. Trump says, I'm a genius. I'm going to solve this whole problem nobody's been able to solve for 75 years. Bada bing, bada boom. We're just going to pretend the Palestinians aren't there. We're going to write the Abraham Accords. We're all going to get on with business. We'll all get rich. It'll be great. Golden escalators for everybody. The Arabs, especially Hamas,
Yeah.
are looking at this going, they have figured out a way to just simply ignore us. We're not even going to talk about two-state solutions anymore. The two-state solution is dead. In fact, we don't even exist. We're in this open-air prison, and, the settlers are taking the West Bank anyways, and they're just moving on like we're tired of this crap. The whole world fighting over the Middle East, the unsolvable problem. Trump comes along and says, hey, no problem. I
So
tell
break
you what, let's all get together, us boys, and have some business and get some money, and we'll just keep some of them in the Gaza prison, and then we'll slowly take. And Netanyahu is like, is a shift. It
Okay.
is a deliberate statement that says, you know what? Why don't we just ignore this whole thing like it never happened?
Yeah.
It'll just get subsumed into the host if we just stop paying attention to it. Let's go on with this. And Hamas is going, holy cow. They're
Yeah.
just, they're really going to do this,
Yeah.
right?
And break down the Abraham Accords for me. What are the key tenets of what that achieved or what that did?
Oh, it said, okay, we're going to make peace. Israel's going to make peace with Saudi Arabia. They've already made peace with Egypt. We're all going to join in a big free trade zone. We're all going to cooperate, whatever. And, and there's absolutely as if the whole Palestinian problem doesn't exist whatsoever.
Okay.
We're moving on. That's basically what they did. Okay?
Because why there's no inclusion of how there's no factoring in of Palestine, of the Palestinians. I mean, what would be the effect on the Palestinians from the Abraham Accords?
Well, I mean, except for Hamas, right? The net result would be that the Israelis would accelerate and ramp up the settlements and slowly but surely eat the West Bank.
So
Keep
not a
all
not
the
a
other
green
stuff.
light, but a yellow light.
Yeah, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah, yeah,
We're not going to say, let's focus on doing business together. Let's not focus on what the hell you're doing
gotcha.
to the West Bank. And Gaza, who cares? Just lock the place up, shut down the Philadelphia quarter, choke them off, let Hamas just burn,
Okay, yeah,
right? because they're never going to change. They're never going to give up their problem, right? Okay. So the second thing that happens is that Netanyahu is going to go to jail, and he's got a serious problem, and he needs to be prime minister in charge of the government. His political party is now too small.
Yeah.
So he makes common cause with the entire rainbow of right-wing, super hardline, little tiny parties,
Yeah.
and he gets to form a government. Now
Yeah.
he's completely beholden to these people. Now they've been fighting against this Palestinian state thing forever. And now there's like, we got to do it now because we can we can we see and understand that Hamas is getting provoked, that Hamas understands that we're just going to pretend you don't exist and we're moving on. Hamas is going to be an issue. If war breaks out, we can destroy Hamas. There is now no one on the planet defending Palestine. Trump says nothing about a two-state solution, right? He's
Yeah.
a nightmare.
Yeah.
Okay? He just let's just change the whole nature of the Middle East and we're done.
Hmm.
Okay? So Hamas says we got to go for broke. Now, I don't condone what they did. I'm just saying I understand how they saw the world, and from their radical point of view, they said we gotta stand up and make the world pay attention to us. We can't let this thing go, which is exactly what's happened. The whole world has gone, you know, this problem didn't get solved, and it's still here, and we still support a two-state solution.
Yeah.
Right? Now, in the black and white beauty contest world of American politics, you're either pro-Israeli or you're pro-Palestinian and all this other.
Right.
I mean, this is just as stupid as all the MAGA versus whatever. I mean, life is
Oversimplified.
complicated. It's
Yeah.
very
Right.
great.
Right.
Okay. But in any event, here you are. So you got Netanyahu. His first act is to try to neuter the Supreme Court because he needs not to go to jail.
Why is he going to jail? He had corruption charges, right,
Yeah.
against him after
Yep.
his prior
Yep.
terms of being prime
They got
minister.
suspended. So just like Trump, if you're prime minister, that stuff gets suspended because you're running
Right.
the Justice Department.
Right. So get back in office to prevent prosecution. Yeah.
Right. So it's hard for cynics like me not to see Netanyahu in the Israeli government,
Yeah.
the right wing
Right.
government,
Yeah.
keeping this war alive
Yeah.
because they need to destroy Hamas. They need to get the world off their back about a Palestinian two-step state. Nobody knows who would ever run Gaza after this thing finally concludes, as long as Hamas is gone. But once you get rid of Hamas, there's nobody calling for the destruction of Israel anymore. Now, the
Your
potential exists
justification
for
is
the
gone.
Arab states to come back in and say, where's our Palestine?
Yeah.
So Israel is kind of like,
So the
it's a bit of a
justification,
strategic dilemma for them.
it's the justification, if I understand correctly, that Netanyahu and the ultra right faction of the Israeli government, it's the justification that they need, which is Hamas is going to destroy Israel and we have no right to exist. We need to hear that in order to keep being justified in us taking land that we want. So if you eliminate Hamas, and as you said, there's no one calling for the death of Israel, that justification is no longer there for you to do what you shouldn't be doing,
Right.
probably in the
In a
first.
way, Israel has treated Hamas like useful idiots.
Yeah, they're using them for their own
They're
advantage.
using them,
Yeah,
right? So I think that the reason we don't have a ceasefire is Hamas has not caved, has not said, you know what? Israel has a right to exist, but so does Palestine. So we're not calling for the destruction of Israel anymore.
Yeah.
They could have done that at any point and pulled the plug on this justification.
Sure. Sure. Okay.
Okay? Israel has this window where they need to be able to acquire or in some way get the land. It's
You mean
all about the land.
The Zionists need that. This section, this subgroup of Israel that believes that this is their land, because I think it's clear, and I don't know the breakdown that in the same way that I don't support Trump, and there's a lot of people in America that don't support a part of American politics.
True.
The Israelis don't
Israeli
support any.
society has the,
Yeah,
the majority of Israeli society,
yeah, are like, hey, let's.
they're over it.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me now, what is as we discussed earlier with the let's say the orientation of American society historically towards Jews, which was not opening their arms as we discussed back in post World War I into World War II. How did we switch to now a seeming obsession with Israel by
Well,
Americans and by American evangelicals in particular?
yeah,
Where did that come?
it's a little bit murky. It's a little bit murky, but when the evangelicals, Protestant and Catholic, right, start making deals with the Republican Party in exchange for their pet projects like abortion and stuff like that,
Yeah,
right? Concomitant with that is the beginning of this business of muscular Jesus,
as we talked.
warrior ethos being imbued into Christianity. The concept that, yeah, Jesus said the kingdom of God is not of this world, but hey, while we're here, God wants us to have our voice and to guide civil society. And you get this muscularity. Now, at the same time, Israel is not the same to people's ears as Jews, right? Israel is a nation that has demonstrated through multiple wars with Arabs that they're a warrior nation. And you know what? That's our Christian Judeo ethic and so forth and so on. And suddenly, over time, we start adopting the American religious establishment begins to adopt Israel as kind of its little poster child of this is what it means to have people of faith involved in the country, and here's what you get with this ethic and the whole 9 yards, which Trump spends all his time pumping up, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
but in any event, suddenly now Israel is a sacred thing to Americans. Like they have a right to exist. And, so this whole thing flips over, even though we're probably still or close to being as anti Semitic as a nation as we've ever been. We haven't changed that much. The hard right, which is actually part of this, is more anti Semitic and at the
right.
same time more hero worshiping of Israel.
So I don't get that. I don't get that at all because they're talking out of. I mean,
They're talking out of both sides of their mouth at the same time.
yeah,
We'll spend a lot of time over the coming centuries in this transition from tribal and others and blood and soil to,
mhm,
hey, we're all on this blue marble together and we're all good and
yeah,
we're all equal.
yeah,
And that's going to take quite a bit. But that process is happening today, despite all of the right wing reactionary stuff that you see around the globe.
yeah,
Around the globe.
yeah.
So it's part of our evolution in a lot of ways.
Well,
But
you might call that woke.
you might call that woke, absolutely. Uh,
Yeah,
people are going to come up with a pejorative
yeah,
for whatever the change is that's
yeah,
occurring that they don't want. Blood
yeah,
and soil does not want change. It wants everything based on the family. If you understand Blood and Soil, when J.D. Vance opens his mouth, you understand exactly why he's talking and why he's making these ridiculous things, because he's blowing a dog whistle for all the Blood and Soil people, saying they're coming for you. They're all going to take this away from you, right? So, okay. I think the concept of the U.S. military industrial concept and the war machine needing Israel and playing a puppet master to this is totally overblown. I think that it's a relationship fraught with peril, but also useful to both sides. If Kamala Harris becomes president, there's going to be some crap going on in Israel, because just like the left in the United States and the left in every society, it is a feature of liberalism and progressivism, is that we spend all our time arguing over who's smarter and has a better policy wonk, whatever, and we can never get together and vote. And the Israeli left, which is the majority, could put an end to this, but they can't, because they spend all their time
nitpicking,
arguing over the details and who's right. So if it isn't the self-righteous right making a mess of it, it's the arrogant far left that's making a mess of it.
Yeah. So let me just ask you a kind of concluding prediction. And I know we talked about predictions. They're they're not what they used to be, or the future's not what it used to be. But tell me, what is your, if, and I hope when Kamala Harris is president, what is your, because as I started with earlier, I at least have a feeling that there are a lot of things hang in the balance, waiting for the result of the election, the Ukraine, Russia-Ukraine kind of war, where that goes. A lot of things are just waiting on who's going to be leading the free world. And so, assuming Kamala Harris is elected, what do you think roughly happens in, the first year?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to understand it's a giant signal. It's just a giant signal to the world that the right wing is not going to win here in the United States, and that America is going to continue to be America. Okay? The better parts of us, right? It's, 51-49, but the better parts of us, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a big message. It may even encourage the Israeli left to put an end to this. Okay? But the other issue is the Palestinian people have to put an end to Hamas. Okay, that's that specific struggle.
Yeah.
A struggle with Russia and Ukraine is a different animal. It's also going to say to Russia, prepare for 4 more years of getting your ass kicked.
Yeah.
Okay? And, let's explain to you what happens to you when you torch off a nuclear weapon. You think things are bad now? Pull that off. And we're going to give more and more stuff to them to make sure that you never win. And the Russian people are going to have to do something about their mess.
Yeah.
The same thing is going to happen somewhere out in the next decade about Xi Jinping by the Chinese people.
Yeah.
The United States does not rule the world, shouldn't rule the world, isn't qualified to rule the world. But it can act as a resistance to authoritarian governments. And, but I think that the reversion of the right wing in the United States is going to come to a halt, because there are adults in the Republican Party. This country needs an opposition party. We cannot go without it.
Of course.
At the same time, Trump and all this stuff, the end result, it's going to bomb them back 100 years. Yeah. And they're going to have some serious soul searching about what the hell the Republican Party believes in. Okay? Yeah. But all that's future music. There has to be a point like this election where we say, nope, that's it. Enough of this shit. We're going to go forward. And I'm not stealing that slogan from Kamala Harris. She stole it from me.
Anyway, get out there and vote. Get out there and vote.
I will. I think I'll vote this year.
I think I'll vote this year too. Yeah. All right, Dad. Well, good discussion.
Good discussion.
We'll talk again soon.
You bet. Yeah. Thank you. I love you too.